Hey everyone, and welcome to this live streaming with SpecialEurasia. I'm Giuliano Bifolchi, Research Manager at SpecialEurasia. Now we are waiting for a distinguished guest, which is Cesare, our colleague Cesare. Discussion regarding the social dynamics in the South Caucasus. Hi Cesare, hi.
Hi, Giuliano. How are you?
I'm fine, I'm fine. What about you?
Fine. I'm fine.
It's good. So, just a few words regarding Cesare. Cesare Figari Barberis is postdoc at Leiden University in Netherlands, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, exactly.
So, today with Cesare, we would like to discuss some issues regarding society in the South Caucasus. We will start at the beginning with Azerbaijan, and then we move a little bit also to Georgia. Why we decide to have this Instagram live? First of all, because society is one important aspect in geopolitical analysis. Since we provide geopolitical risk assessment, we have to understand what happens inside a society. So, first of all, since Cesare has been following the situation in the South Caucasus, I want to tell our followers that you lived in the region. You live in the region between Azerbaijan and Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. You visited several times the region, and from your core, your focus of your academic research is regarding the South Caucasus, right?
Yes, exactly. For my PhD, I stayed more or less 6, 7 months in Azerbaijan intermittently. And I will say overall at least 3 months in Georgia too, plus I visit Armenia. So I traveled all around the Caucasus for my PhD.
Perfect, perfect. So you have a direct knowledge of the region, and not just from the books or from academic
No.
papers, but just also developing a network of contacts and living inside the society. So the main question is, what is happening now in Azerbaijan? So there are several reports, several articles regarding the situation in the country. Also, just to mention the fact that Azerbaijan is an important country regarding the European Union energy security strategy, but at the same time there are some issues regarding the government, the society, what is happening. So tell us more.
Yes, so the situation in terms of internal repression in Azerbaijan is escalating. I would describe it at the moment as a disaster. I would not try to sugarcoat it. It's a disaster in the sense that since at least summer of 2023, maybe a little bit earlier, but let's say summer 2023, the government has started doing a crackdown against any independent media or critical voice. So not necessarily just independent media, but individuals that were critical of the government. Of course, Azerbaijan has always been an authoritarian country, so repression is not an exception. But within this authoritarian status quo, you always have some peaks. And in summer 2023, we had one of these peaks. So we had, just to recap and give some context, we had single medias that were journalists that were part of independent media, so like Toplum TV and Abzas Media, that were arrested. And today, for example, it's like a news from 1 hour ago, so very fresh news. We know that some of these journalists that were arrested, that are linked to this independent media, were asked to have a sentence of 12 years. So they're not yet condemned, but the prosecutor asked for them to have 12 years of jail. The accusations are, of course, always false. It's always about, for media, it's smuggling. It's usually about smuggling or having Western funds, having illegally gotten Western funds. But the government also attacked independent people, so even independent researchers, even acquaintances of mine. Barus Samadov, who's a scholar in Prague, Charles University in Prague, a PhD student. He also was arrested in August 2023 because of his independent peace-building activities and for being critical of the government, both of these things. So there was also a crackdown against single individuals who had pro-peace initiatives, who participated in pro-peace initiatives with Armenians, of course. And the government started a campaign, even on TV, calling these people Khaini, Beten Khaini, so traitors to the homeland, Khainler, traitors. Why traitors? Because of course they had these dialogues with Armenians. So, for example, Baru specifically is accused of treason. So this is literally treason, and he can get up to 10 years for this. Today, another scholar who's a Talish, an ethnic Talish, got a prison sentence just today, so recent news, of 18 years. 18 years, which is a combination of high treason, but also inciting ethnic hatred. And yeah.
We are talking about Iqbal Abilov, right?
Yes, exactly. So 18 years, and this is quite an escalation, because I've been following, of course, the country, and they don't normally give 18 years of sentence. Usually the prison sentence is a bit shorter. 18 years is quite exceptional, and what is interesting about, interesting sort of this case is that we're not talking about a very open person critical of the government. He was not so openly critical of the government. He was not the head of some very important media. He was a Talish scholar he was the leader, head of a small online magazine about Talish culture, but he was not actively participating in independentist Talish activities. He was doing just really research on Talish folklore. So, why did they arrest him?
He wasn't advocating against the government. He was just doing a research regarding the Talish culture in Azerbaijan, and that's it.
Yes, exactly. So it's really strange, because now, of course, the ethnic minorities is a difficult topic in Azerbaijan. They don't want, after Armenian irredentism, of course, they don't want other type of irredentism, and the most possibly prominent one would be the Talish irredentism, because they are a bit more. The other numerous group are the Lezgi in the north, but they are less organized. They also have less national identity compared to the Talish. The Talish instead have a quite strong national identity. They're concentrated in the south. They neighbor other Talish in Iran, so potentially they could organize. So this is a sensitive topic, and even just doing research on Talish folklore, being the head of a magazine on Talish culture, is enough to get arrested for treason and inciting ethnic hatred for 18 years. So there's no reason why they shouldn't stop giving these heavy sentences. This is actually the second heavy sentence. The first one was given to Afiadin, who got 8 years for allegedly, of course it's false, but allegedly stabbing someone. Why? What the real reason? Basically, he was a unionist, so he was trying to unionize, for example, Volt drivers, so delivery, food delivery drivers, to have their rights respected. So he kind of helped organize a few protests. And even this is too much. He got recently, I think it was in February 2025, sentenced to 8 years in jail for stabbing someone. Talking about stabbing, my co-author, and me and you, Giuliano, talked about this. My co-author Ahmad Mamadli, who I wrote with him 2 pieces for ISPIS, which is one of probably the most famous think tank in Italy for international relations. And he's also accused of stabbing someone. So, the accusation is that he entered a taxi and had a fight with someone in the taxi and tried to stab this person. Of course, this is completely false. What was the real reason is that he's...
What are the evidence?
There's no evidence, but they don't need evidence. They don't need... Interestingly, they always find, anyway, they officially accuse you of something. Talking with other friends of mine, PhDs, or postdocs now, that have done research on political violence in other countries, what you don't see in Azerbaijan is people just disappearing. So in other countries, critics just disappear and you never hear about them. In Azerbaijan, you can track everything because they're usually officially accused of something. And they get the prison sentence for what they are accused of, even if this is clearly false. So they try to keep at least nominally keep it official at least, so they don't make you disappear. No, they accuse you officially of something. And so Ahmad was also arrested for allegedly stabbing someone. In reality, he had been critical in the past of the government. He had created a youth movement called Democracy 18, which had been repressed and then has been closed for 1 year because of too much repression. And recently he had turned to online journalism, so he had a small YouTube channel called the Old Dutch Media, in which like videos had 1,000 views, more or less. Each video had more or less 1,000 views. So we're talking really about not much. What I'm a little bit surprised about this crackdown is that they're really scratching the barrel of everything they can repress. They're targeting really not just organizations. At the beginning, summer 2023, they attacked media organizations, right? Or some political groups like Third Republican Platform, which was a new, not political party, but political organization. And now they really moved to just single individuals and people that do research on Talish folklore or have a YouTube channel with 1,000 views per video, so nothing. They're really repressing everything, and people are just scared. So now it's even difficult to find Azerbaijanis that want to speak about the situation. Like I'm trying to talk about this, to talk with some Italian journalists, for example, and some of my friends are trying to have other journalists from Germany and so on talk with people in Azerbaijan, and a lot of people even outside of the country, so Azerbaijanis outside of the country don't want to speak about the situation anymore because they risk too much at this point, because Baruz and others were arrested while they came back from abroad, so they were living abroad, came back to Azerbaijan just for visit or maybe to do some research, and were arrested while they were returning back to Azerbaijan. So but they were living abroad normally.
Yeah.
So everybody's scared now. So the situation is very bad, and soon there won't be much to repress at all, in the sense that the repression has become so strong that either critics are just in jail, or they are abroad, or they're too scared to talk it in the country. So we're really getting to the point where maybe soon there won't be too much repression because they repressed everything. So you reach the time.
But let me ask you
yeah.
these things, because I saw some videos where the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, met a European or Western journalist, and they tried to to ask some questions regarding freedom of expression, freedom press in Azerbaijan, and let's say that he answered talking about the fact that more than 80% of Azerbaijani people can get access to internet, and that there are a lot of media agencies and organizations in Azerbaijan. And he was really tough and strong with some journalists when they ask a lot, questions regarding repression. So, because also we should provide the official narrative. So the official narrative is that Azerbaijan is a country where there is a political opposition, where there is also freedom of expression, and there are different medias, and people can get access to the internet. But so, from your experience, also from your research, of course there is something which the reality is different from the official narrative, first of all. And the second question is, how is possible that in European Union, European Union is still so soft regarding Azerbaijan, regarding all the fact, okay, natural gas matters, oil matters, and SpecialEurasia is specializing on geopolitics, and usually we say natural resource matters, and Azerbaijan is really fundamental, particularly after the beginning of the Ukraine conflict. But how is possible that Azerbaijan, for instance, is one of main partners in the region of Russian Federation? If we look at the fact that 2 days before the beginning of Ukraine conflict, or so-called special military operation in Ukraine, Aliyev met Putin, and they signed different agreements regarding this partnership. Also today, if we look also Azerbaijan, also what the government is doing regarding the Armenians, Nagorno-Karabakh, regarding other things. So how is possible that you have, I don't know, any kind of answer or opinion? What can do European Union to face these problems, and why there is this laissez-faire behaviors?
So you can ask two questions. The first
Two questions. The first one is official narrative and alternative narratives, and your opinion of when can where we can find the truth, speaking honestly, because we should also say that there is official narrative, and we should take into consideration this official narrative, right? There are also some academic scholars in Azerbaijan. They are always stating that the country is free, you can conduct research and other things, but the question is it the right situation, or is just something created, artifacts, fabricated?
Yeah, no, the real situation, of course, we've been discussing repression until now. There's no more independent media. At this point, the Abzas media and Toplum TV were basically the last, and now they're even targeting small channels like that of Ahmad Namadli. There's no independent think tanks. I know, as a fact, that there were a few independent think tanks when I started doing research in 2020. I think it was at end of 2021, beginning of 2022. And one of those independent media, Agora TV, was closed because of government pressure. So I know this as a fact. One of the people that was head of this Agora, so this independent think tank, is in jail, and they asked to have the prosecutor asked 12 years of jail for him. The only remaining independent think tank in Azerbaijan is called Baku Research Institute, and the leader, Altay Goyushov, is self-exiled in France, essentially. So the only reason why it can keep operating is because the head is away. But there is a campaign against it, again, calling them traitors and so on. So political parties, some are called Jib Mukhalifat, which means the political opposition of the pocket, so that you put in the pocket. You do have some really political independent parties, but they are unorganized at this point, and they're interestingly slightly less repressed now because the political opposition is not real opposition. So the real opposition was done by civil society, in a way. But no, there's no independent media. There's very weak opposition. There's no independent think tank. There's one independent think tank, Baku Research Institute, and that's it. So no, the real situation is a disaster. But honestly, while doing fieldwork there, I would say Azerbaijani officials, don't really insist on this with researchers. So it's not like I was talking with Azerbaijani officials, bureaucrats, and they were saying, no, Azerbaijan is a democracy. They don't really care too much. At least vis-a-vis people going to the country too. They don't care about hiding this. Regarding the European Union, as you said, Azerbaijan has a lot of support from the European Union, both from single countries like our country, Italy, which is an ally. I would use the word ally. We get quite a bit of gas from Azerbaijan, and it's an ally country, but also from the European institution per se. So let's remember, let's go with order. On the Lion's visit to Baku in July 2022, where we signed a memorandum of understanding to try to increase gas import from Azerbaijan. Why? Because there was war in Ukraine. Russia invaded Ukraine, so we need more gas from other countries. We were already importing 10 BCMs of gas from Azerbaijan when von der Leyen visited, and von der Leyen did an agreement memorandum of understanding, to try to increase by 1 BCM in the short term and arrive to 20 BCM by 2027. Of course, this will never happen. This will never happen because Azerbaijan doesn't have that much gas. Internal demand is increasing, so they also need to use gas for internal demand. They don't have that much gas to export in the long term. And you even need to increase the infrastructure. You cannot just, even if it had gas, you need to invest on the infrastructure. And of course, Azerbaijan would want Europeans to invest in infrastructure, so to spend money on this. So you cannot just go from 10 BCM to 20 BCM in a couple of years. So, but anyway, von der Leyen had this memorandum of understanding. Then we also had the ethnic cleansing of Armenians in 2023. So September 2023, Azerbaijan is able to retake the entirety of Karabakh and ethnically cleanses. I use this word because even if it was kind of soft ethnic cleansing, every Armenian was pushed de facto to leave Karabakh, almost every Armenian. Nonetheless, you have then Azerbaijan has new presidential elections in 2024. February 2024, and you have the president of the European Council, Georges Michel, that openly congratulates Aliyev on his new victory. So again, you have another endorsement of the president of the European Council. They don't congratulate Putin, but they congratulate Aliyev on winning elections. And this was 2024, beginning 2024, so the crackdown had already started. Anyway, then you have Kaja Kallas's recent visit to Baku again. So Kaja Kallas, the head of the European External Action Service, visits Baku, and if you read the speech, it's available online, freely available online. She again says that Azerbaijan is an important partner. She stresses energy connectivity. She stresses Azerbaijan's solidarity and aid to Ukraine, because Azerbaijan did give a little bit of aid, nothing substantial, but anyway, a little bit of aid to Ukraine. So again, you're kind of legitimizing an autocrat. And the last of these episodes is a lot of the leaders that met in Tirana, in Albania, and there was a meeting between the European Union, so with von der Leyen and Antonio Costa, and the Azerbaijani side. So you can also see the pictures there. And again, the European Union stressed Azerbaijan as important for energy. So to conclude, Azerbaijan is perceived still by the European Union as important, one, for gas to compensate Russian gas, because we cannot import from Russia anymore, from one autocracy to the other autocracy. And the other thing is, because the European Union is also now investing on Central Asia, so there was also an important visit of the European Union in Central Asia, so on the so-called STAN countries, and they want to create more connectivity from Central Asia to Europe, bypassing Russia, of course, so you need also some connections through the Caspian Seas, and then you get to Azerbaijan. Also to try to get in the future more energy, again, in an anti-Russian scenario. In my opinion now, getting aside from analyzing what happened, if I have to give an opinion, all of this is a very flawed idea and a very flawed attempt to detach and to find different gas supplies from Russia. Well, first of all, because Azerbaijan doesn't have, as we said, doesn't have that much gas to offer. So the 10, 11 BCMs of gas is less than 3% of the European Union's gas consumption, less than 3%. And they won't get to 20%. They won't get to, to 20 BCMs of gas. So maybe you can go from a bit less than 3% to 3.5. Is all of this worth it? Is it worth closing an eye on internal repression and on the ethnic cleansing of Armenians in 2023? Is it worth closing an eye on potential new war with Armenia, because Azerbaijan keeps having claims against the south of Armenia, Zangezur or Syunik, as you prefer calling it. In Central Asia, this is a very long-term strategy. It won't give any fruits in the short term, nor not even in the middle term. And then we have to see what kind of fruits it gives. It's so maybe the war with Russia at that point will have been over, and we will have a different commission. Things may change a lot by the time that this plan on Central Asia actually comes to fruit. So sometimes people discuss in terms of foreign policy, European foreign policy, but foreign policy in general, if decision makers are driven by realpolitik, so concrete interest, if they're driven by simply bureaucratic mechanisms, or what's the role of emotions, what's the role of norms, so liberal democratic norms. In my opinion, another factor you have to take into account is simply incompetence. So, and it's not just interest, it's not just norms. Sometimes decision makers are just incompetent, because there's no way of analyzing the situation without taking into consideration simple incompetence by the European Commission, by the European External Action Service, and the European Union in general. Only the Parliament is at times more, I would say, awake or more critical of what's happening. Because it's not just realpolitik, because you cannot compensate Russian gas with a little bit of 1 or 2 BCMs, extra BCMs of gas from Azerbaijan, and in the very long future, more gas from Central Asia. In the very long future, have to invest also millions of euros in infrastructure there. So it's not just realpolitik, it's clearly not norms, because otherwise you cannot not consider internal repression and ethnic cleansing. So I think there's also a degree just of pure sheer incompetence on the side of the European Union.
Well, let's say that probably there is an official narrative regarding the gas that EU provides to the media, to the international audience. This is the official narrative. The fact is that we cannot deny that the position of Azerbaijan is really strategic, is really important, because Azerbaijan is on the Caspian Sea, is in the middle of many, many interests. Is also part of the international North-South transport corridor promoted by Russia to link St. Petersburg to India, to Indian ports through Azerbaijan and Iran. Is part of this EU strategy to reach Central Asia. It has always been part of the famous Trans-Caspian pipeline, which should bring Turkmenistan's gas to Europe, which is more like a legend, more a dream than reality that we know. And also, I still remember all the clamor that the Dostuk, like what was this Dostuk agreement or something that they reached regarding some joint exploration, a joint cooperation between Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan to link the pipeline, but it wasn't possible because if you look at the Caspian Sea legal basis, it is not possible if all the 5 countries accept, this pipeline, and for sure Iran and Russia will be always against this. So let's say that regarding the gas, natural gas is more the narrative of European Union just to justify the support of Azerbaijan for the public audience, for the international audience, because, after the beginning of Ukraine conflict, the natural gas was always a problem issue. So in this case, you have a good narrative. But if I look from the geopolitical point of view, perspectives, the fact is that the position of Azerbaijan is really fundamental, is strategic. And what we can say that Baku was really good at maximizing all the opportunities. We can say this. So from the geopolitical point of view, we should say this. From the democratic point of view, for sure, now the Azerbaijani governments, after what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh, need something more to control the situation in the country. So they need something more. So they are probably, this is the reason why they are just putting in jail also some people that are not so important, not so influential. They have just 1,000 followers, they just publish some videos. They are just trying to control the society, because imagine that without the complete control in the society, Azerbaijan, Azerbaijani people can start also asking questions regarding the internal situation of the country. So let's say this, probably we have geopolitics matters, so because of the strategic position, Azerbaijan
is
is exploiting.
Is it that strategic, like to connect Central Asia, China through Central Asia to Europe? This is a very long term.
Oh, for sure, it's very long term. For sure, I agree with you, and probably is something that it will never happen. Who knows? Because in the next 10, 20 years, everything can happen in Central Asia, and also in the Caucasus. But at least this is something that they are trying to promote since the 90s.
Yeah, but they have 2025. I know you didn't use the word, but the Trans-Caspian pipeline, the defunct Nabucco, getting gas for Turkmenistan would be a game changer. So in that case, it would be for sure a game changer. But
probably it will happen. It will happen just if Iran and Russia will be, I don't know, collapsed or destroyed, because I don't see...
Exactly, because Azerbaijan is in a strategic position, but a difficult position between Iran and Russia. So and Azerbaijan has good relations with Russia, by the way. So that's another thing, another risk, another miscalculation, again, in my opinion, because of incompetence, is that
I can agree with you.
Decision makers think they can use Azerbaijan against Russia, but Russia and Azerbaijan, Putin and Aliyev have good relations. They talk to each other, they visit each other. Aliyev didn't go to Moscow, it's true, this year, but they have excellent relations. Putin came to Baku, and Aliyev was very welcoming and smiling. So
Yeah, but also,
there's many
if
Russian schools that, in Baku still, and they keep opening
Dagestan
schools.
has increased its relation with Azerbaijan because of many reasons. Also, they are cooperating logistics in agribusiness, and Dagestan has a shared border with Azerbaijan. Also, every month there is an interministerial meetings or formal, informal meeting between Russian and Azerbaijani sides. I can completely agree with you. There are a lot of miscalculation. Probably the main issues is that they are not, probably in Brussels, they are not considering all the imperatives and constraints of the area and the geopolitics. They are not considering all the aspects, unfortunately. And this is, and what also cares more regarding in our geopolitical framework is the fact that, so we have Azerbaijan. He has specific characteristics regarding the internal politics and regarding the government and regarding also the strategy. Closer to Azerbaijan, we have another country, which is Armenia, which now is always talking about the famous, peace corridor and hold the peace deal. And usually, when we talk about Armenia, we say that probably there is also miscalculation in Yerevan, because talking about peace, when on the other side, you have some official remarks, official statement by Baku regarding Western Azerbaijan, regarding, the importance of Zangezur, Oceanic region, the fact that Nakhchivan should be linked, officially linked and connected to the other part of Azerbaijan. It's really hard to believe so. So on the one hand, we have Azerbaijan government, which, put in jail also some opposition, minor opposition figures. On the other side, we have Armenia, which is probably talking alone regarding peace. So what's your opinion about this?
Yeah, Yerevan is going on a dangerous path.
Yeah.
Because now it's losing Russia's security guarantees. They were never super reliable, to be honest, but now they're completely losing them. And the European Union is not offering so much in return, and it has not so much interest in Armenia. For my new job as a postdoc, I'm also doing interviews in Brussels, and Armenia is not a big topic. So Georgia bit, Armenia is not. It's not a big topic. Armenia would now like to enter the European Union, but there's really almost no prospect. Why would you want Armenia in the European Union? Now the Commission and the External Action Service is investing on Azerbaijan, in the sense that they want to use Azerbaijan in what they think is a strategic way. So if Azerbaijan started a new war against Armenia to take the south of Armenia, so Zangezur's unique, to create the Zangezur corridor, in my opinion, not only would European commissioners and bureaucrats not be angered, they may, allow me to say, in the back of their mind, even be happy, because finally they have this connection also, and you have regional connectivity. So von der Leyen stressed Azerbaijan's importance for regional connectivity. A new war, in a way, would increase regional connectivity in the sense that you can indeed, at that point, go from Turkey to Azerbaijan to Central Asia, and you get what the European Union wants. So Armenia is playing a difficult game because, in my opinion, the European Union is not very interested in the area. Yeah, they would support a peace deal, of course, but realistically, this peace deal is not coming anytime soon because Azerbaijan keeps pushing the requirements to sign a peace deal. The peace treaty is ready, but Aliyev keeps putting new requirements to sign the peace treaty. So I agree with you. Armenia is playing a very dangerous game. It's a very difficult position for Armenia. Super difficult.
It's facing more constraints than reaching its imperatives, first of all. Secondly, I can understand, be disappointed with the Russian Federation because what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh. I can understand everything. But, without Russian support, the European Union support, the USA support, Armenia could really, the only country we can try to stop this is neighboring Iran. But, Iran is not in a good shape now. It's not really good shape now to after what happened in the Middle East in the last couple of years. So the situation for Armenia is really dangerous, and sometimes I have the feeling that the Armenian would like to play always the card that they are the reliable, honest people. They want to reach the peace deal, but in geopolitics, morality doesn't matter. Which matters is more like imperative and constraints, what you can offer. And the question is usually what Armenia can offer instead of Azerbaijan or instead of other countries. It's very hard to believe now,
Yeah, they can't offer much. Well, morality matters only in certain issues. So if you talk about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, rightfully, morality plays a role, rightfully. And then for other topics like Israel-Palestine, the
Yeah.
Commission closes an eye, European External Action Service closes an eye, everything that happens in Azerbaijan, they close an eye. So it's interesting because morality and values matter on certain issues, certain dossiers, but not in others. For the Caucasus, as you said, it's just geopolitics, apparently, and
Yeah.
almost nothing.
But when they didn't close an eye, wasn't the case of Georgia. So we had some conversation in our podcast before, and I want to finish with Georgia because also you have been long in Georgia, So also Georgia, the situation is really peculiar. Let's say this, because like 2-3 years ago, Georgia was, or before the beginning of Ukraine conflict, Georgia was really close to European Union. Everyone thought that Georgia could become, another asset in the Brussels, pockets. But today Georgia is completely different. I'm talking about okay, the official stance of Georgia under the government of Georgian Dream, which won the last elections. It was like last year, like in the last elections. Yeah, last year, if I'm not mistaken. And so, what's the situation today in Georgia? So, first of all, are there still the protest manifestation against the government or not? And if there are effective or just?
Every day in Tbilisi, but they don't gather enough momentum. So it's interesting because they're persistent. So you keep having people protesting against the government because they say that the elections are illegitimate, and we do know that there were irregularities, although not as much as some people think. So they do continue, but earlier we mentioned Albania, so the meeting of many leaders, European leaders and non-European leaders in Albania. If I'm not mistaken, also Georgia was there. So Kobakhidze was also present there. So he is, in a way, recognized as a leader. The Georgian government is recognized as such. Here we have a big split between the European Parliament, who heavily criticized the elections, and the European Commission and External Action Service, which had, as you said, they closed half of an eye. So they criticize, but in the end, they're still interacting with the government. Talking with officials in Brussels is interesting because they mention a lot Georgian Dream's drift towards Moscow, and this is a factor. And for me, it's interesting because, honestly speaking, if you really analyze what's going on, Georgian Dream's policies and so on, it's difficult to claim that they're so pro-Russia. There's two elements. They're becoming. One is being pro-Russian, the second one is becoming more autocratic. Georgian Dream is becoming much more autocratic, so it's repressing critical civil society. So with the famous Russian law, which is Russian law because it has similarities with a law that was applied in Russia in 2014. But anyway, it does restrict civil society's independence, especially because they would be less able to get independent funding from abroad. So this clearly is against civil society, and they did say repeatedly that they could ban opposition parties for a number of absurd reasons. So they're going against opposition parties, they're going against civil society, they are arresting individuals. They also have violent groups, so a little bit kind of the old Italian fascist groups that would just go around and hit people and hit critical people. Don't know fully how linked they are to the government. So are they just pro-government people, or are they receiving orders from people linked in the government? Could be both ways. Anyway, it's very worrisome. So the situation is sliding also in Georgia towards semi-autocracy. But on being pro-Russia, it's honestly difficult to argue that the government is that much pro-Russia because it did not apply sanctions against Russia when they were asked. I mean, it would be economically difficult to do so.
Yeah.
Turkey did not apply them. Is Erdogan pro-Russia? For me, this is absurd. Or the other thing is that, yes, the leader, the de facto leader of Georgian Dream made a lot of money in Russia. So he became very rich in Russia. So maybe he has economic links in Russia. Okay, but this is very weak, in my opinion, to just argue that the Georgian government is pro-Russia. But the Georgian opposition managed to convince a lot of people in the European Union that this is the case. So now Georgia, I hear a lot in Brussels, Georgia is going away from the European Union, but not because it's becoming more autocratic, but because it's becoming pro-Russia, which is again, in my opinion, a wrong analysis. Georgia is going away from the European Union because it's becoming more autocratic. This is true. This is undeniable. But the fact that it's becoming pro-Russia, it's much more debatable, in my opinion. But yeah, this is the situation. And yeah, I'm not optimistic anyway for Georgia either. Now for 4 years you'll have autocratic consolidation, and then we need to see the next round of elections, how those will go. Because at that point it will be after 4 years of autocratic consolidation, so less civil society. The loss of US aid funding was a disaster because a lot of independent, or at least independent from the government media, they were not as independent.
Yeah.
But anyway, so in semi-independent media and civil society in Georgia was linked, was funded by USAID, and this lack of funding is resulting into a disaster. So in 4 years we'll have, well, at this point 3 years more or less, we'll have a country which has been gone through autocratic consolidation. So I don't know. I mean, will we see another kind of Azerbaijan? Also in Azerbaijan, we didn't get to this point in one day. It was gradual.
Yeah.
Azerbaijan had more civil society in 2013 before this first big crackdown of 2013-15. I don't know. Will we see the same thing in Georgia?
Let's say that, especially Russia, usually we say that one pivot moment was 2020, so the beginning of the pandemic, but also the 2020 was the year of the famous second on Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, or the 44 days on Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. Because if we compare the rankings and also the statistics regarding democracy in the South Caucasus, in the entire South Caucasus, to today, okay, we can just assess that the situation worsened. So the situation is really, really bad today compared to 5 years ago. Because look at Azerbaijan now. So in the past, okay, there was repression, but was repression regarding big entities. But now what you told us regarding also the case of these independent researchers, academic researchers, or bloggers, so the situation is affecting also people like they are not so important in the political environment or media environment. In the situation in Georgia, completely changed. 5 years ago, it was hard to believe that Georgia could become more autocratic and far from the European Union standards. So it was working to reach the standard. Yeah. They had a lot to do, but they wanted to do. Today, the question is if they still want to do or not. They just put a pause. But also the situation in Armenia, speaking honestly, in 2018 there was the famous color revolution on Pashinyan, went in power against the famous old nomenclatura linked to Soviet Union corruption, a lot of promises. But today Pashinyan is arguing against, if you think, against also the refugees, Armenian refugees from Nagorno-Karabakh, and sometimes also in the parliament, his speeches are really, really strong. And also if we think about what happened in June 2024 with the Tavush for Homeland movement led by the priest, they were just demonstrating in front of the parliament. There was a huge crackdown from the police. So if we look the entire situation in the South Caucasus, we can say that the democratic value, the democratic situation is not the same than before. Unfortunately, I can see also these patterns in Central Asia.
Mm.
You know why? Because think about Central Asia, what happened in 2022 in Kazakhstan. Internal protest, there was the first time the Collective Security Trade Organization sent military, support, and they cracked down this kind of protest, and they were like, okay, modernization, referendum, election, but there were elections where the leaders, in the case of Kazakhstan, got more than 80–90% of the vote. But if you look also Uzbekistan, what happened with the Karakalpakstan autonomous region? And there was a huge crackdown, there were victims, and then, okay, another elections, and the president was confirmed again with more than 80% of the vote. We should mention also Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. Turkmenistan is more like, we can say it's a republic, but is led by a family, like a monarchy, or a familiar business, and family business. So the situation is, even though the rankings, sometimes international rankings, they are doing something. But if we compare the situation today, what happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we can say the situation is, can have more negative aspect than in the past. This is my opinion. We can say that the COVID was one of the most important pivot, and then 2022 was another pivot, because with the Ukraine conflict, since this region became important, really strategically important in the region geopolitical games, they got more opportunities to run their business with close eyes, not just one, with close eyes by the West. So this is an assessment. So this is my last question for you. What do you think about this?
I think overall you're right. I can't judge too much for Central Asia. I mean, I'm interested in the region, but I cannot give an assessment as an expert on that. But for the Caucasus, for sure, for the war, so Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 really changed a lot of things. That's why we actually get the things that start deteriorating in Georgia. And of course, also in Armenia, this changed. In Armenia, especially the war for Karabakh into 2021, but also the war in Russia, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, because also Russia's costs and opportunities changed at that point.
Yeah.
And this had reflections and consequences on the field in the Caucasus. I thought, honestly, before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that the Russian peacekeepers would stay longer in Nagorno-Karabakh. I think all the expenses, the human cost that Russia had to face invading Ukraine created some constraints, and they started needing more Turkey and also Azerbaijan for their geopolitical games. And this turned to Azerbaijan's favor, for example, and Armenia suffered from this. So for sure, Russia's invasion, I'm not sure too much COVID. I would have to think about that, honestly, a bit more, the effect of COVID. But for sure, Russia's invasion of Ukraine changed a lot, and I agree with you. Now they can demand more from the European Union and give less. And
well, I'll say
Georgia,
COVID. Sorry.
Just to finish, they closed half an eye because they were more critical. But there's an interesting editorial piece by OC Media that also talks about Kaja Kallas's visit to Baku, and they argue that, I mean, if two countries are neighboring each other, they look what's happening, and if you have and they say, like, if Georgian Dream is looking at the fact that Kaja Kallas, European Union, visits Baku and they just say good words, so they see that they can repress, they can do whatever they want, and Azerbaijan and the European Union won't do anything, and the Georgian Dream is taking note of this. So maybe we can do the same. Like, if we stay fairly important, then maybe we can we can repress more or do other things and still survive. But for Georgia, let's see in 3-4 years
For sure.
Elections.
What will change? But I say COVID also because for a couple of years it was also hard to work if you think that no one was thinking anymore about international relations, geopolitics, and the situation abroad. So everything was just, at least in the West, in Europe, all the attention was regarding fighting the COVID, they try to recover, and after after we start recovering, was more about how we can survive, how we can support European economy, and probably we woke up from all the COVID's nightmare in 2022 with the Ukraine conflict, with the beginning Ukraine conflict. Because if you remember, we stopped talking about COVID in February 2022. And I'm saying more this because for a couple of years, international relations, geopolitics wasn't so important. It was more related to the healthcare system, to the economic aspect, but not regarding frozen conflicts and possible confrontation. No one talk anymore about, in the 2 years, about terrorism, about conflicts, about any kind of military operations. It was also the reason why the second Nagorno-Karabakh conflict was partially covered, if you remember.
Yeah, not so much. It was
Not so much. Not so much. So I'm saying this, probably in a couple of years between COVID and the beginning Ukraine conflict, there was less activity, less interests, and now we are facing a situation that's, was created by 2 years that no one cares a lot about, about the Caucasus, about the post-Soviet space. So just to close, your last sentence or remark regarding...
Last sentence.
Allow
me to complain a little bit about media coverage in our country, so in Italy, about we started repression in Azerbaijan. Let's conclude with that. There is very little coverage, almost no coverage about these issues, about all the repression which started in at least the crackdown in summer 2023, even with people that wrote for ISPI that got arrested, so even people that somehow are linked to Italian think tanks. And there's almost no coverage. So Domani wrote a piece about this.
Domani is a newspaper.
Yeah, Domani is a newspaper.
Just to the international audience.
Domani is an Italian newspaper, not the biggest, but quite famous, I would say. Then you have small groups that write something, but not big newspapers. And big newspapers like La Repubblica, who has a journalist based in Tbilisi even, probably there's a will of the editors, not of the journalists, but they had covered only about Georgia. So if you look at La Repubblica, one of the biggest newspapers in Italy, what they write about Georgia, you have many articles about the protest, about civil society being repressed, and so on, about the elections, and so on. There's nothing about Azerbaijan in a critical sense. So there's no critical article about Azerbaijan, about the crackdown, about arrest, since I think the last one was from 10 years ago. So since the crackdown, they've written nothing. And is it possible that you write about civil society in Georgia, which is attacked and loses funding and so on, and you don't write anything about civil society in the neighboring country in Azerbaijan? I think there is a clear editorial decision in that case. And in general, it's quite shameful that I don't have proof, but I assume that because there are interest behind that some of these newspapers that they don't write anything about it. Anything. That's it. This is the end of my complaint.
Okay. So we register your complaint. So at SpecialEurasia, we can say that we analyze more the geopolitical risk, but we wanted to discuss several times societies. Also, we criticize always everyone, so probably it is not good because we always criticize. But our way of thinking is just try to understand what kind of situation can create a geopolitical risk in the future. So we are not just criticizing because we don't like the countries. So speaking honestly, the reason is that we try to understand the situation to provide a solid intelligence for the decision making. And probably you say something really interesting, is that if you want to report about a region, you cannot just report about the politics, the economy, the international relations, but also about the civil society. And not just in Italy. Let's say that what is happening in Azerbaijan and other areas, in general, in the Western media, it is not really well covered, or it is not covered at all. There are some independent media that are doing great jobs, but just few of that. And then there is SpecialEurasia. So one reason more to follow us, at least. Okay, so thanks again for being with us, for sharing your opinions, also your expertise. We just hope that the situation will improve in the South Caucasus and both of the free republics, and we just hope also that academic researchers can just conduct their work, just doing their research, as the media can just conduct their work, just reporting the information in a more democratic way as possible. So thanks again, Cesare, to be with us, and
No,
this
thank you,
video,
Giuliano, and thank you, SpecialEurasia, for covering these topics, which have
it's always
geopolitical implications. Yeah.
It's always a pleasure. So this video of Instagram Live will be, available on our Instagram account, but also we will upload on our YouTube channel. So if you missed the opportunity to listen to us, you can listen again us on Instagram or YouTube. And we are going to write a brief summary of this speech between us in the next days. So thanks again, and I wish you a good evening, Cesare.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Ciao. Grazie.